Are you feeling bored, unfulfilled, lost, or lacking meaning, purpose, passion, or direction in your life? Well, if so, I'm going to help you with that. To begin with, if you're feeling bored, lost, or unfulfilled, it's because you don't know your needs and wants, and you're pursuing your wants at the expense of your needs. I'll explain that more in a little bit. If you're feeling a lack of meaning, purpose, passion, or direction, it's because you don't know your morals and values, and you're stuck giving yourself away, living to the morals and values that were placed into you by your caretakers as a child. Again, I'll give you solutions on all of that. So the reason this happens, and it happens to all of us, it happens in childhood. Think about it. I mean, our parents, part of it's healthy. They impart their morals and values, their needs and wants, their negotiables and non-negotiables on us. Some of that is good, much of it is too much, and if we were taught about parenting, we'd go about sharing our morals and values with our children but allowing them to figure out what theirs are. And so this is why you're caught in this, is because as a child you had no choice. You had to accept them. But now that you're an adult, you're in this quagmire of, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right. Well, that's because there are some morals and values that you probably want to hold on to that were your parents, but many of them, if you're feeling this, many of them you don't want, and you're living against yourself, and that's why you're stuck in all of these feelings. Because as a child, we had no choice. So we feel lost as an adult now that we're on our own, and we do have a choice, but we were never taught by our parents how to discover these for ourselves. So let me give you an example. I lived through this myself. My dad, just before he died, we were sitting there talking, and he said, "You know, Kenny, of all the kids, you were the easiest." Now, what my dad didn't realize was the underlying message in that statement. He meant it as a compliment, but because we don't teach about any of this stuff, what my dad didn't realize is what he was saying is, Kenny, you gave up your morals and values. You had no needs and wants. You completely suppressed whoever you wanted to be to make our lives easier. And that's the dilemma you're caught in too. It's a scale. It might be more severe like it was for me, or less severe, but you became easy in some fashion. Again, it's a scale. And so I became a child who realized the only way I'm going to fit in this household is to have absolutely no personality, no desires, not pursue anything that matters to me, but mold myself into what made my parents calm, quiet, happy, so I could get whatever love and care was possible. Now again, most parents don't do this maliciously. Mine sure didn't. But we're not taught how to teach these things to our kids. And so this is what every parent does to their child, not because they're bad parents, but we can only do what we know. And since we haven't been taught this, parents don't know. And so, we have a choice. If we know more, we can do more. Or if we know more, we can do better. And that's the goal here, is to become better at this. So the result of me being the easiest and learning it's not safe and okay for me to have my own morals and values, needs and wants was, I remember I was in college and we took this incredible trip through Czechoslovakia, the old Czechoslovakia, Sweden and Finland. And in between games, we'd go on all these excursions. Well, everyone on the team would, go see all these sites and take all these pictures. I never left the bus. I'd sit there all day long on the bus. I didn't have any morals and values, needs and wants. I was an empty shell. I had no desires, no passion. I was lacking meaning, purpose, passion, and direction. I felt bored, unfulfilled, and lost because my job was to be an athlete. That's how I was going to fit into childhood. So I had no clue how to pursue joy, which are our wants. The only time I ever left the bus on any of those trips was, I can't remember if it was Sweden or Finland, but the bus was parked next to this museum. And I got out, and I don't know why I just remember this, but it was a museum of their past leaders that had been assassinated. And I just remember looking at the military uniform of one of the presidents, that, the bullet hole was right there. That's the only time I ever left the bus, because I was lost, lacking meaning, purpose, and direction. The other way this showed up in my life was in my first marriage. I didn't know that I could choose who to be with. I remember as a kid, laying in my bed, thinking about, I wonder who I'll marry. I wonder if she'll be pretty. I wonder if she'll be nice. Do you hear that? It was never, I want to marry someone who's like this, this, this. In other words, expressing my morals and values. What do I value in a woman? What are my beliefs? I want a woman who does this, this, and this, and likes this, this, and this, and treats me this way. Those would be my values. I see those as morally good. I had none. I was sitting there wondering who was going to pick me. Well, someone did. She asked me to marry her. I was like, well, I guess this is her. I'll never forget it. When she said we should get married, inside I went, well, I guess this is her. I didn't know I had a choice. And so, as many of you know, she was physically and verbally abusive, and that's an indication of my lack of, as much as that tells you about her, that tells you about me too. You don't end up with someone like that unless you're pretty broken yourself. I was very broken. And so I'm very fortunate that she chose me. We were two very broken people who were a perfect fit for each other. That's the thing what people don't realize. When you end up in these terrible relationships, you're just a mirror of each other. Neither one's better or worse than the other. You're both hurting and broken and doing the best you can with the trauma that you've never dealt with. Well, that was us. And so there I was at 38 years old, and I'd been to many counselors, but as many of you know, very few are truly educated on how to help people. What they learned in school doesn't help them heal people. Well, finally I met one who had done the work outside of it. And after explaining a bit about my childhood and my marriage, I just summed it up by saying, Mike, I don't know how to be a man. And I didn't. I had no clue. I had no idea what my morals and values were, what my needs and wants were. I didn't even know what they were, like what those phrases were. I just knew I was this empty container with no direction, no meaning, no purpose. Lost, bored, unfulfilled, and in tremendous pain. So, if we want to discover what our true purpose, passion, and direction are, we need to learn about our morals and values. Everyone thinks they know what they are, but they don't. Our values are our beliefs, and we see them as either morally good or morally bad. Now, so the work that is in front of you is what I had to do. I had to look at all the so-called beliefs that my parents had placed into me. And I had to look at them and go, are those actually mine? Do I believe that? Or do I think differently? So for instance, there were a couple of things of beliefs that my dad in particular had that I looked at. One was table manners. My dad was a Nazi, very old world. Table manners. Chew with your mouth closed, elbows off the table. Don't talk with your mouth full. You don't use the only time you have two utensils is to cut something. You put the knife down, put the hand in your lap and eat. Not like today where everyone shovels with their knife onto their spoon or fork. Like my dad would go berserk. Like that to him was just barbaric. And I looked at those table manners and I decided I wanted to keep them. Now the problem is very few people eat that way, the way my dad did. So there's a consequence to me holding on to that value and seeing it as morally good. I can't date very many women because my skin just crawls when I see poor table manners, just like my father. I chose to embody that. But see, I made the choice now. That's what gave me purpose, passion, and direction. And I began to feel, I didn't feel lost and unfulfilled as I went, no, I'm going to hold on to that. Because one thing my dad said, he goes, this will matter when you get older in business. And he's right. People pay attention to that stuff. It matters. And so that's why I've held on to it. Another thing that both my parents believed in was chivalry. A woman should never touch a door, never pull out her own chair. Oh my God, never put on her own coat. That's just beneath her. Now that's caused me problems too. Lots of women, well, you don't think I can do it myself? And what I realized then is, we have different morals and values. I value this, she doesn't. She sees it as morally bad, as somehow I'm thinking she isn't capable or something. That's not my reality, but I just see our morals and values don't line up. Oh, okay, now I know. Remember how I said I didn't know who would pick me as a kid in a relationship? Well, now since I know my morals and values, if a woman gets upset that I hold the door, or if I pick her up, I'd say, please wait in the seat, because I don't think a woman should open her car door. And I walk around, and I've been on dates where I ask someone, would you mind waiting? I'm going to open your door. And they get out and open their door instead. And I'm like, that's it, done. Our morals and values are different. Good for her, like I want her to pursue hers, but it lets me know we're not a fit. But see, I looked through this and decided these were my parents, but I've now made them my own. Now, there have been other morals and values where they've changed. For instance, my parents pretty much instilled in me I'm an athlete. That was the moral and value. That's who I am as a person. Well, I thought that was me. I played 2 pro sports, but I realized, no. I play sports now. I play tennis and a little bit of golf just for exercise. I realized I was doing it for validation, to validate my worth, that my worth was contingent upon, what kind of athlete I was. Well, that's not how I validate myself anymore. I've changed that. And so the way I validate myself, or my moral and value now, another example of my parents' morals and values was, don't share anything publicly. Like I remember when I first got sober, and I tell people, and I was an alcoholic and I was in my early 20s, my dad he just cringed me like, Kenny, don't tell people that. Well, I kind of understand that, especially back then, it was a real scarlet letter. Socially, it was unacceptable to admit that, and he didn't want me to, experience backlash. But that wasn't my moral and value. I wasn't ashamed of it. I place a high value on openness, vulnerability, truth, responsibility, and healing. That's my highest value. And my most highest value is holding myself accountable, calling myself out on my self-deception, admitting my imperfections to myself and the world, and facing them. That's my highest value, to confront myself at all times. I hold that value. I want that on my tombstone. He owned his SHIT, and he dealt with it. Not that I was perfect at it. I still have gaps, but that's my highest value. And so that's why I have this career. That's why I share so much about my life story, to try and, because these topics are difficult, and if I didn't share my story, at least in my reality, it'd be like I was talking down to you, as though I was better than you. Well, I'm just as imperfect as everybody else, and it's my value that we're all struggling. And the only way we ever heal is for us to be open and vulnerable and drop our shame about it, because everyone's human. Look, if you think there's someone on this planet who's not completely messed up, then you don't know enough. Because when you start learning all this, you'll see, like all my clients are like, oh my God, you're right, it's everywhere. All these people I thought had it together, they're a total mess. Yes, we're all a total mess. And it's wonderful. Like, to me, I don't think that's something to be ashamed of. It's just reality. It's just truth. And it doesn't make us bad. And so my moral and value is being truthful, responsible, and accountable for my perfect imperfections. I see as morally good. My dad saw it as morally bad. So I made a vast change there. All right? So that's why you're lacking meaning, purpose, passion, and direction is you don't know your morals and values in every area of your life. You're living some of those based on what was imparted into you, but many of those you don't want. And you're living against yourselves And that's why you don't know which direction to go, because you don't know your own direction. Just like me, you're a blank slate in pockets, maybe not as extreme as I was, but if you're struggling with any of this, it is because you're going against your morals and values, most likely because you don't know what they are, and you're living to somebody else's, and that's what's shutting you down. You're depressing. That's all depression is. Depression is when we depress who we really are as a person. We go against ourselves. And so we end up sabotaging our own purpose and direction. So that's how you work with the overcoming the lack of meaning, purpose, passion, and direction. You need to sit and go through every single area of your life. Look at all the values that were placed into you and how you were told they were either morally good or morally bad. And decide for yourself, do I agree with that one? If not, then what is it you value? But it's finances, it's parenting, it's relationships, it's table manners. Like, it's the smallest little thing. How often do you think that your house should be cleaned? What kind of food should you eat or not eat? What should you drink or not drink? Like, all of these different things. It's the tiny stuff, And that's what you haven't done. And that's what's keeping you stuck in the lack of meaning, purpose, passion, and direction. All right, so now let's move on to if you're feeling bored, unfulfilled, and lost. This is needs and wants. So our basic needs, every person needs food, clothing, shelter, money, intimacy. These are the things a need is something we need to survive. Our wants are things that bring us joy. Trips, clothing, certain foods, whatever it may be, they bring us joy. Now, the reason you're feeling bored, unfulfilled, and lost is you're pursuing your wants at the expense of your needs. Now, I did this repeatedly. If I had money, I'd spend it. Well, then I would be stressed out, bored, unfulfilled, and lost because I couldn't go do anything. I had to pay rent, or I was always behind financially, things like that. Another way I didn't meet my needs and wants was in that divorce, because I didn't know my morals and values. I didn't know I had any value and worth. When I moved out, I rented an apartment. I had no furniture, no TV, I had no bed, nothing. Back then I had a remodeling and custom furniture making company. So I brought in 2 sawhorses, slab of plywood, put my computer up just to run my business. I slept on the floor with a couple pillows and a couple blankets. I didn't meet my need for shelter. I mean, yes, I had a roof over my head, but I didn't take care of myself. I didn't think I was worthy of it. Remember, I was the easiest kid. I'm not going to impose on anyone. So we had all these beds at the house. I didn't even think I could ask for one. Think of that. I couldn't take care of my needs. And so that's what ends up leaving us feeling bored, unfulfilled, and lost, is we'll end up then spending money or pursuing sugar hits, is what I call them. We'll go on trips, we'll buy new cars, we'll pursue our wants. We want a momentary glimpse of joy to get rid of the boredom, the lack of fulfillment, the feeling of loss. And it feels good for a second, but by the next day or the next week, it's gone. And we repeat that cycle. But somewhere in our life, we're not meeting our basic needs and wants. So what I had to learn to do was, before I pursued any want, was to ask myself, does this put my need in jeopardy? So one of my joys is a Dairy Queen Blizzard. Now, it's much cheaper to go to the store and buy ice cream. And sometimes I do that, but other times I'm like, no, I know it's $8 and I could get a whole carton of ice cream for $4. But that Dairy Queen Blizzard brings me joy. So I'm going to pay twice as much. Does it sacrifice my needs? No, I have the money, I have the shelter, I have the clothing, I have the food. Okay, no, I can do this. And so that's what keeps me from feeling lost and unfulfilled and bored. I'm pursuing something that brings me joy, but doesn't cost me my needs and wants. All right? So if you're struggling with either of those, get into really taking the time to take an inventory of your life and see how you're giving yourself away. How are you stuck in childhood, being the easy child, going against yourself, giving yourself away, and not living to your full meaning, purpose, and potential?